What do you think what do you think my view is that you disagree with?
Well, I guess that'd be worth hashing out a bit more, just to be like really specific in this case. But like when I look at a verse, for example, Romans 8:8, so then they that are in the flesh cannot please God. I'm absolutely convinced that they that are in the flesh is an unsaved, unregenerate man. So if they can't please God, and faith is pleasing to God, which it obviously is, they can't have faith in Christ except they are in the Spirit.
Okay, so let's talk about that then. I'm looking for a particular word here. The mindset on the flesh. So I don't know if you're looking at the screen, and it's probably delayed anyway. Can you see the screen, or are you watching it?
Actually, right now I'm not looking at it.
Okay. Well, that's fine. I'm just going to talk you through this as I'm moving something here. So those who are according to the flesh, okay, you have, so you have this idea about the mind. It says, those who have set their mind on the things of the flesh, those who set their mind according to the Spirit. Okay, so let's think about this. So you said that those who set their mind on the flesh are unsaved individuals.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, what if I show you someone, do you think Peter was saved? Do you think Peter was saved as he was walking around with Christ?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to Matthew chapter 16. Now, this is a famous passage that I'm sure you and I would agree with or agree on. And we would disagree with the Catholics. So you have the famous confession in Matthew 16. And what Jesus says in 17 is, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah." Now, do you believe that Simon is saved or unsaved right there?
Oh, I definitely believe he's saved right there. Yeah.
Okay. So,
in fact, just to be clear, like, I would think that the disciples got saved pretty much when they met Jesus, or if there's like a first recorded confession of them recognizing he's the Messiah, and that seems to be very early on from meeting Jesus. So
okay, fair enough.
If not even saved before then, but I would just tend to want to say that, okay, in recognizing him as the Messiah, that is, the what seals the deal for them.
Okay, I don't disagree with any of that. So both of us taking the position that Peter is saved here. Now, it says that as it goes on in verse 21, Jesus talks about his death, and it says in verse 22, "And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid it, Lord, this shall never happen to you. But he, Jesus, turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan, you are a stumbling block to me." Now, this next line is what I want to ask you about. It says, "For you are not setting your mind on God's interest, but man's." Now, it actually uses the verb of the mind of the word that's used in Romans 8. Now, in Romans 8, it says the mind set on the flesh. Now, this is opposed to the things of the Spirit. Here he says he's being rebuked for this particular viewpoint that he has. And Jesus says, you are not. So Jesus is talking about what he is currently doing. And he says, you are not setting your mind on God's interest, but man's. Now, here's a case of Peter doing the very thing he's talking about in Romans 8. So how would you harmonize that?
Tell me again which verse you were looking at about the things it said on the things of men versus God.
Matthew chapter 16, and it is in verse 23. Now, for those of you...
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just to be clear for the audience, like I'm a KJV only guy, so the King James language is different from the version you quoted.
I'll just go to the King James.
But that it's a savorist. But that being said, like I can still maybe get the point of like, okay, like there's still obviously a thing of the mind here, that's happening. So there's still relevancy to your argument, despite the language difference of what I'm going to go with versus what you're going with.
But I mean, you would agree though that the Greek. I mean, I have the Greek here on screen anybody can pay attention to it. It's the same. It's the same. You know, the Greek is the same in Romans 8. It's phroneo here. And if I go over to Romans.
Are you doing Blue Letter Bible?
No, I got the King James on the screen. I have my own. I got accordance.
Okay. I just meant for like the Greek, if we're showing that. So, because that would be the TR Greek. So, I don't know if there's a discrepancy in.
No. So in Romans it says in verse 5, they that are after the flesh are minding or do mind. It's King James now. Do mind the things of the flesh, and it's the same verb. It's phroneo. Here it's phroneusin because it's third person plural there. So it's the same word. Now it says those who are in the flesh are phroneoing the things of the flesh, and what Jesus says to Peter at a time where Peter is thinking a way that is contrary to God's, and Peter is told by Jesus that he is minding, phroneoing, not the things that are of God, but the things that are of men. So there you do have an example of a saved person who is minding. Now that is my view, that you can be saved and you can set your mind on things of the flesh. And isn't it true, though? I mean, wouldn't you agree with me that sometimes Christians are thinking ways that they shouldn't, and we have to come in and mind them? That's not the proper way. You got your interest in the wrong place. You're seeking the wrong things. You're at odds with God. That's what I believe is happening in Romans 8.
Okay. No, I do agree that Christians, get in the flesh. But do I believe that Romans 8, particularly in the verses that we're citing here in the earlier part of the chapter, are about that? I don't.
Okay. Well, I mean, honestly, I kind of knew that because you're a Calvinist. But what I'm saying is that in Romans 8, hold on, let me get back to my screen, at least on my monitor here.
I'll just say this, a lot of people I think would think of me as the Calvinist. I don't, I'm not a tulip Calvinist as far as because I would have modification on all the points, I would say, in the final analysis compared to maybe the more traditional tulip. But nevertheless, I think my conclusions will still end up being, leaning Calvinist versus Arminian or something like that.
Okay. Well, so you said that you disagree with my viewpoint. Now, what the text, of course, doesn't go out of its way to say this is about unsaved people, this is about saved. Now, you said, I believe this is about unsaved individuals. Well, even if it was about unsaved people here, I just demonstrated from Matthew 16 that it can also be true of saved people, even if it's not in Romans 8. Now, I don't believe that it's not only about unsaved people in Romans 8. But even if it were, Jim, I just demonstrated from Matthew 16 that it's true of saved people too.
Well, that makes sense because this might also be another difference that we have is in the flesh. I mean, although I would agree that, well, maybe we don't agree on this, but I would say that yes, that's pointing to a state of a person, in the flesh versus in the spirit, but it's ultimately going back to the fact that we have a mortal body, and I do believe that our mortal body is inherently sinful. So Christians, we have, even though we would be considered, I think in Romans 8, the ones who are in the spirit very clearly, but at the same time we have this body of flesh, and that's constantly at war with our spirit.
Okay.
And the Spirit of God, as well.
Well, but the ultimate question is, because you said you disagreed with me that this was, and you said this was about saved people, but just on that point, to keep it on point, even if it were, Jim, the truth is, but this would be contrary to Calvinism. You say you're maybe a little different, but the point is, Calvinism says it can't ever be about saved people, and I just demonstrated that it is. So that would be, that would be a point against Calvinism.
Well, I think so. This is you might find this strange for me to say, but so I'm a dispensationalist before I'm a Calvinist, I would say. So I'm much more happy to embrace the term I'm a dispensationalist versus a Calvinist. So
okay,
and I won't even necessarily say that a dispensational argument is what I have to use, to distinguish Matthew 16 from Romans 8, but I would just use the general concept of rightly dividing the word of truth is something like, okay, that's just a different category of thought. Like, it's still logically possible for Romans 8 to be talking about, okay, a person in the flesh is an unsaved, unregenerate individual versus a person in the spirit is a saved and regenerate individual. And at the same time, Matthew 16 is dealing with a saved individual that's pre-death, burial, and resurrection.
Well, but I agree with that.
He's having a bad moment.
But see, that doesn't work in Calvinism. I mean, and that's really what the discussion is about, because Calvinists would have to deny, and they do deny, that in Romans 8, a person in the flesh could ever be a saved person. It's just not possible. And that's the whole point. But I demonstrated from Matthew 16 that there is saved people, because the truth is Romans 8 is not about two categories of people who have no control over which category they are in. The truth is, Paul is just saying, if you set your mind on the things of the flesh without saying who can or who cannot, then you're going to be in hostility with God, which is Peter's problem, which is why he got rebuked. Because as long as he had his interest on man's things, he was not doing the will of God. That's the whole point. So, but anyway, I appreciate you calling in, Jim. Call in again sometime.